Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be one that has been long awaited on this channel by all of you and one that's been long awaited by myself. I wanted to get this video out for forever. This is a Proffie tutorial video, adding sound fonts, adding blade styles, customizing blade styles, all of that stuff. So let me get this out of the way first because this is the most important part of this entire video, the most important part of all Proffie editing besides only using the SD card method, which I'll get to. If you are having trouble with connecting your Saber to your computer, it is very, very likely that you are using the wrong type of cable. Now you may think micro USB cable, they're all the same. No, they're not. There are micro USB charging cables and there are micro USB data cables. Most computers can run current through that cable to charge something. If you're using one that only has charging capability, the computer will try to charge your Saber through the micro USB port and it'll fry your Saber. Not a fun time. It happened to me. So you need to make 100,000% sure that you are using a micro USB data cable. You can find them at Walmart, Target, Best Buy, Office Depot, wherever. I got mine off of Amazon. After I fried my soundboard, shout out to Jeremy of Solo Sabers for reinstalling my soundboard. He recommended these. These are on Amazon. It says Ranky right there. This isn't sponsored. Ranky micro USB cable. These are data cables. Most of them that you'll see are like 480 megabytes per second or something like that. You need to make sure they say data transfer or data or something. You need to make sure they are data cables. Trust me. That is an extremely common issue that you see on the Proffie groups and the Our Lightsaber subreddit. People hitting me in my DMs, people on my YouTube channel in the comments. People are using the wrong type of cable and they're frying their soundboards and they're not able to access their Saber because there's no data transfer going on between the computer and the micro USB port on the Proffie board. If you're not using the right type of cable, you're going to have a really bad day. So make 100,000% sure that you're using the right type of cable. That is, I don't want to say the crux of all evil, the crux of all issues for Proffie, but it is the crux of a vast majority of issues, because if you don't even have the right cable to access your files, access your Saber on your computer, you can't do anything. I'll leave a link in the description below where I got these cables from. It comes in a pack of 3, which is nice, and they are like the braided cables, so they won't snap as easy as, ones that aren't braided. So what I'll do in this video is I'll show you, first off, I'll try with the easiest method of adding sound fonts to your Saber. So what you'll need in this case are some form of a micro SD card reader. I have one of these. I don't even remember where I got this from, but you can see the micro SD card port to USB. Just plug that in the computer with my micro SD card in it. And obviously you'll need access to your micro SD card on your Saber. Reason I've waited so long on making this video is so that I can have a micro USB port and a micro SD card slot that are very easily accessible on my Saber. And this newest install with my AniFlex V2. Go check out that video if you haven't seen it already. I have very, very easy access to both of them right there because this is a removable chassis. So if you have something like this, that the board is like a press fit down into the shelf or something like that, and you're having a little bit of trouble, getting to the SD card, you can use something like a mechanical pencil. Go on the side and pop it up. If you have tweezers or something like that, that could also be, really easy. But in this case, I'll just pop it up from the corner. Be very careful. You don't want to mess up your SD card. They are more fragile than you think they are. So I'm going to take out my SD card, my micro SD card, and I'm going to put that into a micro SD card reader. And then I'm going to plug it into my computer. So this is going to be the absolute easiest way to add sound fonts on your Proffie Saber. My computer's probably going to make a noise or something. And alright, so this is my micro SD card of my Saber. It's now connected to my computer. First thing I'm going to do, and first thing that pretty much all of you should do, is make a copy of absolutely everything in here. Copy, make a new folder, SD card, Saber, something, and then, copy paste everything into that folder. Might take a little while depending on how much stuff you have in there. I have, about a gig of stuff in here. But as you can see, something I'll mention real quick is that these names are really short. Now, for some reason, and people have gotten around this, and I don't know how they do that, but For some reason, Proffie, they make you use shorter names. So like less than 8 characters to name your fonts. I've seen people use more than 8 characters and they were fine, and I've seen people use like 5 characters and they weren't fine. I'm not sure what's up with that, but I keep my font name short. So for example, this Ahsoka is called The Sorcerer by Kyberphonic, and how I sort all of my fonts, or I'll put like sorcerer underscore Kyberphonic when I'm like putting it somewhere. But I had to shorten that name to just Ahsoka so I can fit it on the SD card. You'll see why names being shortened kind of matter when I show you the config file and all that stuff, because you kind of want to save as much room as humanly possible with your config file. All right, so I'm going to show you real quick. This is my config. I built this, and Jeremy from Sabers just messed with the clash setting a little bit. But this is my config file. It looks crazy for people who have never, done config files and stuff. This looks like a total headache. Sometimes it can be, but if you do it the right way, which I'll try to show you in this video, then it really isn't that much of a headache. So we don't have to mess with this for this method. This is the first method that I'm going to do. And I'm just going to have some fonts right here. All right, so what I'm going to do is this folder right here, new Proffie fonts. This comes from my computer. This isn't my micro SD card. So I created one called Yoda. This is Grandmaster by Kaseth, I believe. So what I'll do is I will copy all of the files that are in here, copy those, and then I'll go into a font. We'll just do this one, Qui-Gon. This is Qui-Gon by Kaseth. So what I'll do is I will delete all of these sound files from the Qui-Gon font, and I will replace it with the ones from the Yoda font. So this may not make sense to you yet, but you'll see why I'm doing that in just a second. So I'm just going to delete those. Permanent delete, yes. This is why you got to make a backup, people, because if you mess it up, then you lost your font. You'll have to go and re-download it from your email, and it's just a headache. So make sure you backed up everything. So Qui-Gon, it may look the exact same. Font makers usually make these folders and stuff for Proffie. They don't have to have folders, but it just makes it easier. So fonts from one to the other kind of look the same until you actually go into the files and like listen to them. This Qui-Gon folder, this Qui-Gon font folder is now a Yoda font folder. Remember, that's all you have to do. So eject the micro SD card from the computer. Going to take it out and I'm going to put it back into my Saber. And then I'm going to show you that that Qui-Gon font is now a Yoda font. Now, important thing to note real quick, I did all of that, removing the micro SD card and putting the micro SD card back in. I did all of that with the battery out of my chassis. If you have a removable battery system, remove your battery. You don't want to mess up anything. Just remove your battery before you do all this stuff. Also, if you have a recharge port only and you can't access the battery, but you have a kill key, put that in. If you have a kill switch, turn the kill switch on, kill power to the board. You don't want to be messing with stuff while the board has access to power. So if you're removing the micro SD card, putting it back in, you want to make sure there's no power to the board. So I just wanted to mention that real quick. I'm going to put a battery in this AniFlex V2 chassis, and I'm going to put it back in the Saber, and I'll show you that font.
Master Yoda.
So you heard Master Yoda. Before I did any of this, a Yoda font was not on the Saber. And if you don't believe me, you can go check my video about my AniFlex V2. I did not have a Yoda font on the Saber. So it's hard to see. It's green. This is now a Yoda font. This is not a Qui-Gon font anymore. So how did that happen? I replaced all the sound files in the Qui-Gon folder with the Yoda sound files because the Qui-Gon folder is attached to a preset on my config file. That sounds like a whole lot of nonsense to you, but I'll show you what that means in just a second. Alright, so going back to my SD card backup, so I don't have the SD card in the computer right now, but I can show you on the backup folder that I made. AniFlex _config. Remember, this looks crazy. I'll try to explain it as best as I can in this video, but let me go down to where it says Qui-Gon. So right here, Qui-Gon. That means that when you do this correctly, when you do your config correctly and you flash it to your board, all that stuff, if you name it correctly, that means in your SD card, we'll just use this backup folder as an example, the board will try to find a font folder called Qui-Gon, spelled exactly the same way. So Qui-Gon down here, just like that, and it'll try to find a font folder called Qui-Gon spelled exactly the same way. So that means that I know that I wanted the same blade style. Qui-Gon and Yoda have the same blade style, they have the same blade color. That's why I just used those two examples. So when I replace the sound files in the Qui-Gon font folder, it will use the Yoda sound files instead of the Qui-Gon files because they aren't there anymore. They don't exist anymore according to the board. But the board still thinks that that's the Qui-Gon sound font. It doesn't care that the sound files are different. It just needs to be a folder on the SD card that is called Qui-Gon. So that is the quick and dirtiest way. That's the quick and easiest way to add a sound font to your Saber. Remember, as of right now, there isn't really a way to change blade styles and like how CFX does it, where you just twist and you change the blade style and all that stuff. As of right now, there's not really a way to do that. But with ProffieOS 6 and edit mode and stuff, that will be coming in the future. So everything I say in this video is subject to change once OS 6 comes out, because Frederick and Fernando, FET263, they're doing some incredible stuff with ProffieOS 6 coming in the future, and I'll probably make another video on that in the future once that actually comes out. But all of this is true as of ProffieOS 5.7, which is the current release. All right, so next up, I'm going to show you the most common way that people add sound fonts to their micro SD card and their board, which will be through the config file. This is the one that people have the most trouble with. So for messing with your config, adding sound fonts through your config, all of that, what you'll need to do is have the software available that actually accesses the board and lets you make adjustments. So what that is called Arduino. So what you're going to do is you're going to just Google ProffieOS and it'll come up with this frederick.hubby.net website. I'll just leave a link to that in the description below. ProffieOS open source lightsaber software. What you'll need: electronics, aka a Proffie board, Arduino IDE. So this is Arduino. Just download whichever one fits for your computer, Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. Mac is the easiest way to do this, actually, because you don't have to mess with Zadig, which I'll get to later. You'll need the Proffie Arduino plugin, if you have a Proffie board, obviously. So what you'll do is you'll download Arduino to your computer, you'll start it up, and then you'll go to Preferences. So I have Arduino right here. This is what Arduino looks like. You go to File, go to Preferences, and then right here, Additional Boards Manager URLs. And they have this link thing right here to a GitHub. So that is this link right here. You're going to copy and paste that into the preferences, the additional board manager URL. And then after that, you can forget about Arduino for just a second. What you'll do is you'll download this right here. You'll download version 5.7. If you have an older OS, like 4 point something, you're going to download this. Even if you have OS 5.7 installed on your Saber, you still need to download this and put it on your computer. I have it right here. It's just called ProffieOS on my desktop. That's OS 5.7. Do all that stuff. Come back to this. Preparations for Proffie board. Install the latest Arduino software, obviously. Install the Proffie board Arduino plugin, that link that I told you. And then what you'll also do, you'll go back to Arduino. Then you'll go to Tools. Then you go to Board. And right away, yours probably won't say Proffie Board V2. You'll go to Boards Manager. And then you'll just look up Proffie. And then it'll come up. And it'll say Proffie board, and then you'll find this right here. I'm actually going to update this right now to 2.2 version. I had 1.0 installed, but I'm going to update it to 2.2 because that's the newest version, and it takes up less space in your config files when you start adding blade styles, when you start messing around with the config, because all of this uses flash memory on the board. None of this stuff, your blade styles, all that stuff, it's not stored on your micro SD card. Is stored on the board itself, the board's memory. So that means it has a limited amount. It's not like an SD card where you can just get a 128 gigabyte SD card and have a million blade styles. That's not how it works with Proffie, at least yet. That may change in the future, but as of OS 5.7, which is the current build of Proffie, that is how it works. So I just did version 2.2. That means when I flash my config, it'll use less space than the normal 1.0 version. So you'll go to Tools, Board. It may not say Proffie board yet, even if you did the boards manager thing. You'll go down right here, Proffie board, select V2, because that's the one you're using. So now you're all set. So once you have all that done, you can go in here, you can select board, USB type serial. You can do serial plus mass storage. You can do serial plus mass storage plus web USB. They suggest serial plus web USB plus mass storage. So we'll just do that one right here. There we go. And then now you may proceed to installing ProffieOS on your board below. So this is this part right here. So you'll download and unzip the TNC Saber software from above. They mean Proffie board, same thing. Open up the Arduino software, go to File, Open, and select ProffieOS.eno. Now, the ProffieOS.eno might just be called ProffieOS. And yeah, there we go. So we're going to go here. Remember, you downloaded the ProffieOS 5.7, so that was at the top of this page. Right here, this is what it's talking about. Download version 5.7. Download that, put it on your desktop or somewhere safe. I'd recommend the desktop because it's the easiest. Then you'll go to Arduino. You're going to go to File, you're going to go to Open, and then you're going to go to ProffieOS, and it says something right here. So it's looking in the folder ProffieOS. The folder ProffieOS is right here on my desktop. So in this folder, which I'll just open it up so you can see what I'm talking about, you'll see all this stuff. It's the exact same stuff. So in this folder, you're going to be looking for something called ProffieOS, and it's a .eno file. It says right there. Click on that. It's going to open it up in Arduino. So now you can see it says ProffieOS. ProffieOS. There you go. So last time I did this, I was messing with my twin son's config. So I need to find what my config is, what the name of my config is on my micro SD card. Remember, I already made a backup, so I can just look at this right now. I don't have to plug in my micro SD card. You don't need your config file on your micro SD card, by the way. A lot of installers and Saber companies put the config file on the micro SD card so you can access it and so you can use it and mess with it. But you don't need it on your SD card. It's not needed because it's flashed to the board. So, config, I'm going to just copy and paste that to the desktop just because. AniFlex config. Naming is incredibly important here. So AniFlex config, AniFlex underscore config. Right there, you can read that, AniFlex underscore config. So what you'll do here is you are going to copy and then ProffieOS folder, the one that you downloaded from the Proffie website. You're going to go to config. There's a folder called config on here. And as you can see here, twin sons underscore config, twin sons shoto config. Those are in here from when I did my Proffie editing on my twin sons. Those are in here because you have to do that. So I have my AniFlex config copied and I will paste it into this config folder. And there it is right there, AniFlex underscore config, and it's a H file. So I didn't mess with anything yet. So we can go in and mess with it real quick. So for example, we're just going to add another font to the Saber. Not exactly sure how much space I have on my Saber right now, how much space I have on the board memory, but we're just going to give it a go anyway. Let's find a new font. Let's just do this. Let's just do this Leia one right here. This is Royalty by Kyberphonic. So I'll actually need to connect the micro SD card back to the computer. I'm going to just use the micro SD card reader. All right, so I'm going to open up the USB drive, which is the micro SD card reader with the micro SD card in it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Leia folder, copy it, and I'm going to just add it in to this folder, which is the micro SD card. This is the actual micro SD card that goes into the Saber. I'm using the micro SD card reader, so I'm going to just copy it in. Remember, where is it? Right here. It'll just put it up here. Leia, that is the new folder. So what I'll have to do now, ProffieOS folder on my desktop that I downloaded from the website, config. Remember, I already showed you my AniFlex config is now in here. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to go in here and I'm going to have to add the Leia Soundfont to the config for it to work. Remember, this will change when ProffieOS 6 and edit mode and all that stuff comes out. This is just for ProffieOS 5.7 and below. So whatever blade style I want, we'll just do a new one since just so I can show you how to do all this. And it makes it a whole lot easier if I actually just show you how I do all this. So we're going to go to FET263's website. Just like Google FET263 and you'll come across this Proffie board responsive style library. OS 5.6 or later because I'm doing 5.7. And then you're going to go to one of these blade styles, he has embedded YouTube videos to show off exactly what all of them do. There are explanations, very detailed explanations. This is a Leia sound font, so typically I do something like an audio flicker, because that's as close to canon as possible as what you see in the movies. But we can do something different. We'll just do random flicker, that's fine. So hers is more of like a blue or a deep sky blue. We'll just do deep sky blue because I like that color. Now, this is his customization and enhancement screen. So pre-on effect, this font does not have a pre-on, but if you do, you can create all kinds of crazy stuff right here. Pre-ons, ignition effect, this is just a total, canon style one. So I'm not going to really do anything here. Lockup effect, this is the one that I like. I like responsive lockup V2 low blade. Lockup effect color, you can change whichever color you want. I'll just do sequel trilogy because Leia's was in the sequel trilogy. Lockup begin transition. Honestly, you can just do whatever you want here. Lockup color, lightning block, stab, blast, blast color. I'm just make everything sequel trilogy because it's a sequel trilogy font. So I'm not gonna really mess with any of this stuff. You can go in and mess with all that, and then once you're done, you press Get Style, and it'll copy it. So what I'm gonna do next is go to Frederick's website, the Proffie website, the Proffie style editor. So Proffie editor. And then it'll come up right here, Proffie style editor. And remember, I just copied that blade style from Fet's website, Control V, submit, paste it in here, and then press submit. And you're able to see what it looks like. It's really cool. This is a very, very cool thing for Proffie. You can see all your blade effects before you actually put them on the saber. You can make sure they actually work. Lockup, you can see the lockup right there. Drag, tip drag, melt, lightning block. I mean, this is very, very cool, and it's very easy to tell what exactly you're putting on your saber before you put it on. So that looks totally fine to me. So this is copied already. So what I will do is I will go back to this. This is my config file. So what I'll actually do is I'll just paste this into another one so I don't lose it. And I'll just hold that right there. You need to be very careful when you're editing Proffie blade styles because this is one of the more confusing things for people is that they'll just copy and paste something and then they'll forget a bracket, they'll forget a comma, they'll forget, whatever, and they're totally confused and they get these all kinds of errors everywhere. But just pay attention. So I'll just add it in right after Qui-Gon. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy the Qui-Gon thing. You'll see why I'm doing this in just a second. And I'm gonna paste it. But I'm gonna rename Qui-Gon to Leia. You can add a track. There's a tracks folder that is in the micro SD card. If I can find the micro SD card somewhere, there it is. There's a tracks folder. This is where you put all your tracks. Just make them simple names. I'm not gonna really mess around with the whole tracks thing right now. I'm just gonna use a track from a different font. So Leia, we'll just do Fates again. That's fine. I don't really care that much. And then we're gonna go to the blade style. This is the blade style that we did from Fet's website for the Leia sound font. Gonna copy the entire thing. Copy, even these parentheses here. Leia. Then you're gonna select this entire part until this comma. There's a comma, then there's a quotation mark, there's a word, quotation mark, bracket, comma. This first comma, after these parentheses, you're gonna select from there until it says style PTR, style normal, or whatever. Then you're gonna paste that new blade style in. If you do it exactly like that, you will be fine. Okay? So I'm gonna just make these closer together. So now I have my Leia sound font. It's using the Fates, which is the Duel of the Fates from episode 1. It's using that track. I don't really care about the track right now. That's not important. Blade style, it's using the random flicker. So I'm going to save. What I'll do is go back to Arduino. So these defines right here. So you see how this right here, it might be hard to pick up on camera, but this right here says define, and this is green, and this is black, and these are kind of grayed out all right here. This is the config file that you're using for your saber when you go to do all this stuff. So config, I'm going to change this to AniFlex, because what essentially Arduino is doing here is it's looking for a config file in the folder config, in the ProffieOS folder, this folder, config. It can use any of these. Most of these are like different boards and all that stuff. Don't worry about it. It's looking for, in this config folder, a config called AniFlex underscore config.h. AniFlex underscore config. It's an H file. So all set there. We're going to press this button, which is verify. And it'll tell us if there are any errors or anything wrong with this config right here. It doesn't mess with any of this if there are the 2 slashes right in front of it. It says compiling sketch. Get a little progress bar right here. If there are any errors with it, it's going to let me know beforehand. All right, so this is something that you'll see very, very often. It says 76% of program storage space. You'll see something like this. It says like warning, changing start of section.bss by 8 bytes. It looks like an error message. It's a known error message, and there's nothing wrong with your Saber. There's nothing wrong with your board. Just forget about it. You can go check the Proffie support group on Facebook. A million people ask this all the time. And look, by the way, people, if you join a Facebook group or a Reddit or some kind of group, search the group before you post a question, because I guarantee someone's asked it before, especially in the case of Proffie. There are not a whole lot of errors that people get that no one's ever seen before. Now, there are some, but something like this, people see this every time they do their config. So don't worry about this. It says something like it's changing it by 8 bytes. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. Now, our config is fine. So what I'll do is I will remove the micro SD card from the computer. It's in the micro SD card reader now. Put the SD card back into my Saber, and I will connect my Saber to the computer. This is the part that a lot of people have trouble with, so pay attention. What I'm going to do now is, with the battery removed from this Saber, there's no battery in there. I'm going to plug this into the computer. If you have a recharge port, you better put a kill key in there. You want to kill power to the board. If you have a kill switch, turn the kill switch on. If you have a removable battery system, remove the battery. The only power that should be going through this is the tiniest bit of power that the computer is going to be putting through this micro USB data cable. It can still put power through a micro USB data cable. It won't do it like a charging cable will. Charging cable is going to fry your board. The micro USB data cable will not. So we're going to put this in the micro USB port, and then we're going to put this other side into the computer, and it should say like setting up Proffie board or something like that if it works correctly. All right, now don't be surprised if your Saber makes a weird noise and it makes like a really gravelly kind of gross noise. What it probably is the boot sound from the last font that you left your Saber on. So I just heard the boot sound for, I think it was like an Anakin font or maybe a Yoda font or something like that. So don't worry about that. That happens all the time. It's just the board getting enough power from the computer when you plug it in that it's trying to put the sound through the speaker, but there's not enough power, like with a charging cable, that it'll actually push clear sound through the speaker. Don't worry about it. It's totally fine. So as you can see here, we're setting up a device. We're setting up Proffie board. Device is ready. Proffie board is set up and ready to go. When you go to Arduino, you'll see port, and then you'll see something here, and it'll say Proffie board on there. Click that one, and then you're ready to go. So what you'll do now is, this is verify, which we already did. It says that it's 76% of program storage space. Then we're going to click upload. Now, remember that thing that I saw that said we're setting up Proffie board. If you don't see any of that, then you'll have to use Zadig. Zadig is the one that sucks. That's the one thing you don't have to want to deal with for Proffie. Sometimes you'll see a Saber that you do Zadig once when you first get the Saber, and you never have to do it again. Sometimes you have to do Zadig every single time that you plug the Saber into the computer. Sometimes you literally never have to do Zadig. For example, this is the first time that I plugged my AniFlex board, the Proffie board that's used in my AniFlex. This is the first time I plugged it into my computer on video, and I didn't have to use Zadig. Now, is that because I've already done Zadig and it's, done the drivers for Proffie? Yes, it could be, but people have also never had to use Zadig before because it just works somehow. I don't know how to explain it. Most people don't have STM32 bootloader drivers on their computer for no reason, unless they use those kinds of boards for whatever kind of stuff they use them for. There are videos such as my board just made another noise once it finished. So as you can see down here, download done, file downloaded successfully, transitioning to DFU manifest state. I'll get to my point in just a second. So this is done. So what I'll do is I'll just unplug this from the computer. then I'll throw a battery in and I'll show you the font. So what I was saying with Zadig is that there are videos from Stephen Powell of Powell's Power-Ups and also BK, Brian Cornacker, however you say that, sorry man. They are two videos that I learned from. I learned a whole lot from. Shout out to those guys. I'll leave them in the description below. That covers Zadig. Zadig is one of those things that if you do this correctly with the correct micro USB data cable, sometimes you won't have to do Zadig at all. So if you went to Arduino, let me pull up Arduino again. If you went to Arduino and you go to Tools, and then you go to Port, and with your Saber plugged into your computer, if you go to Port and there's nothing that says Proffie board, what is very likely to happen, or if you try to compile and it says like a DFU device something unrecognized, and it counts to like 10 instead of doing that progress bar that shows 100% completed and all that stuff. If you see that it's doing any of those things, or if it's giving you an error saying like did not compile, what is likely to happen is that you'll have to use Zadig. Zadig downloads the drivers. It doesn't have anything to do with Proffie. It downloads the drivers for your computer to recognize an STM32 bootloader board, which is what Proffie uses. So if you get to this point in Arduino, you're trying to compile, you're trying to flash the board, but there's nothing coming up in port with the Saber plugged into the computer, then you need to go through Zadig. And I'll leave links in the description below to BK and Stephen Powell's videos, and you can check out how they do Zadig. I am not going to mess with Zadig, especially not for this, because I just did it and I don't want to mess anything up. I don't have a Saber here that needs Zadig, so I'm not going to do it. But there are videos out there. There are several videos out there that cover Zadig. So I will not cover it in this video. But if you get to that point where you can't compile because the Saber is not being recognized by the computer, then you need to use Zadig. So if I did this correctly, the Leia font should be right after the Qui-Gon font on my Saber. Or actually, since I changed it for the purpose of this video, it's actually a Yoda font. So it's right after Qui-Gon, but it is the Yoda font now. So after this should be Royalty by Kyberphonic. Yep. That's the Leia font. So, we did that. Leia font works great. I don't know if you could pick it up on video because it's probably a little distorted, but it did say Leia before, and that is I recognize the Leia hum for the Royalty Soundfont by Kyberphonic. So, that is done correctly. And if I put a full-length blade in there, you'd see that it was a random flicker. I could tell that the blade style was working correctly just by looking at the blade plug and how it was a different shade of blue than the other blues that I have on the Saber. This is a little bit more of a deep sky blue as compared to the regular Jedi blue. So all is done correctly there. All that's left is just a few housekeeping notes that I'll mention in just a second. Alright, so I'll show you the quick and easiest way to add sound fonts to a Proffie, which is just swapping the sound files in the micro SD card. Remember, that does not use Arduino at all. That does not use Zadig at all. That solely uses the micro SD card, the storage for the sound fonts. That's basically all that the micro SD card does, is it holds the sound fonts, it holds the tracks. There's a few settings, but it's not the config on the micro SD card like with Crystal Focus 10 or some other boards. Proffie uses the board's memory for the config files. That may change in the future, but as of 5.7, OS 5.7, which is what I'm using right now on March 27th, that is what Proffie uses. It uses board memory for the config file. So, quick and easiest way, just copy and paste Soundfont files from a Soundfont and put it in a pre-existing Soundfont folder for a Soundfont that's already on the micro SD card. That's the easiest way. You don't got to mess with anything. You don't got to plug the Saber into the computer. None of that. You can just take that micro SD card out, put it in your computer, drag and drop the files, take it out, put it back in your Saber, and there's a new Soundfont on there. Albeit, it will be with the exact same blade style that the pre-existing font had on there. So, say you're swapping the default sound fonts like Smooth Jedi, Smooth Gray, Smooth Fuzz, Rogue Commander, all those default Proffie sound fonts, it will use those exact blade styles for them. And unless you go in and change the config file, which is the second method, it will always use that same blade style. If you want the blade styles to change, you got to mess with the config. That may change in the future, but as of OS 5.7, you can't do that yet. So, second method, going in, messing with the config, defining the config in Arduino, verifying the config, make sure it works, going in and adding a new sound font. Remember I showed that Leia font that I put in the config right after the Qui-Gon font, which I changed to the Yoda font for the sake of this video. Went in and copied a blade style from Fet263's website. I tested it on the ProffieOS style editor from Frederick, put it in the config, saved it, verified it through Arduino, worked perfectly fine. Only used 70-something% of my board storage, so I can put another few sound fonts on there and I'll be totally fine. Then I went in Arduino, I went to Tools, and I went to Port, labeled Proffie, clicked on that one. That means that the computer is using the port that is connected to the Proffie, which was the micro USB or the USB port here on my computer. It's using that one to compile the config to that board. So it sounds like a whole lot of nonsense. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but there are Proffie groups out there. There's a Proffie board support group. There's the open source boards group on Facebook. There's the Lightsaber subreddit. I mean, there are a ton of resources out there for Proffie. You just need to look. I'll leave links to some of them in the description below. But before you post anything in there with an error that you're having or with trouble that you're having, search the group. Please. All of these groups have search functions. Just search the group with what you're looking for. Use a keyword or something. I guarantee you someone's had the same issue as you with a Proffie board. And remember, you better use a micro USB data cable. Micro USB data cable. They look very similar. Unless you know the differences between the pins of a micro USB data cable and a micro USB charging cable, you probably won't be able to tell the difference. You need to make sure you have a micro USB data cable. I'll leave links in the description below to the ones that I use. Remember, it's not sponsored. This is just something that Jeremy from Sabers LLC told me that he uses, so I use the same ones. And it worked perfectly fine. I've never had an issue with these cables. So, all that said, if you have any questions, rewatch the video, because I may have covered it. You may have not been paying attention when I was doing a certain part of the video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Go search those groups, all that stuff. And good luck, and may the force be with you.